This panel really needs no introduction, but I will try. First of all, my name is Pappy Menon. I lead product management and business development for Outshift, which is Cisco's incubator group. Today, I'm here with a very stellar panel. I'm really excited to see all of these folks. I want to hear what they have to say about investing in the age of generative AI. So, off to my left here, I'm going to give a couple of quick, a couple of lines about everyone. To my left here is Tim Tully. Tim is a partner at Menlo Ventures, focused on early stage investments, and has led investments in companies like Pinecone, Neon, and Edge Delta. Before joining Menlo, Tim was CTO of Splunk, so near and dear to Cisco, and oversaw the company's transition to the cloud, helping the company more than double its revenue from $950 million in 2017 to $2.25 billion in 2020, so over a period of 3 years. Next to Tim, we have Jocelyn. Jocelyn Goldfein is a managing director at Zetta Venture Partners, where she backs early AI startups. She has had a stellar career as an engineering leader in companies like Facebook and VMware, where I knew her personally. So good to see you again, Jocelyn. She is widely recognized for her expertise on product strategy, infrastructure, and scaling startups. During her tenure at Facebook, she helped convert the newsfeed to machine learning and led some of the early virtualization work at VMware. Welcome, Jocelyn. Next to Jocelyn, we have John Sakoda, who is near and dear to our hearts at Outshift. John is the founding partner of Decibel, a newly formed early venture firm that invests in early technology companies. Previously, he was a general partner at New Enterprise Associates, and prior to that, he's had some operational experience. He was a founder of IamLogic, serving as its CTO and vice president of products through its acquisition by Symantec. And next, John, welcome, John. And next to John, we have Saanya Ojha, who is a partner at Bain Capital Ventures, where she leads growth stage investments in cloud infrastructure and cybersecurity. Previously, she was a partner at Code2, focusing on growth investments, and before that, she was at Goldman Sachs. So as you can see, what this panel does not know about investing in general and investing in particular in generative AI companies is not worth knowing. So I'm very excited to talk to all of them. So let's kick things off with a very general question. How has investing changed in this new world, with generative AI? So I'll start from my left here, go through each of the panelists one by one. So Tim, what's new now?
I think the newest thing right now is, to me personally, is the prices. Like the prices are sky high. I've seen probably more billion-dollar seed funds in the last month than I have in my entire life. It's a little bit hard to wrap your head around. I think the other thing that's sort of new is just dealing with the velocity and growth of the companies that we're seeing right now. It's unprecedented growth. You're seeing folks go from 0 to 10 million of ARR in 6 months. Mm-hmm. Traditionally that would have taken a number of years. So there's new physics that you're sort of trying to figure out and deal with all the time, and it feels like I have to recalibrate every month essentially.
Yeah, Jocelyn.
Yeah, I think every year I was in venture, I would have said the prices are so high and the velocity is faster than ever, and yet somehow that still feels new and different every year. I think the downstream consequences of high prices are interesting too. I think a lot of people are becoming entrepreneurs because it's just they feel pulled that now is the time. But certainly the access to capital at attractive prices is one of the many incentives that are drawing people in that direction. So I think there's just way more froth. There's just to try to get coverage, to try to see everything is impossible. And so you make your peace with how do I sample and still, find the best things.
John?
I would say speed, from concept to company to competition. Maybe that would take years. Now it takes months. And I think that is likely to stay for a while. It's like if you think something's a good idea, you better get going because everybody else will eventually think it's a good idea too. So some people say momentum becomes the moat. Mm-hmm. It's you just have to stay ahead of everybody. And I think that those are new playbooks and new physics that we all have to learn in this environment.
I think it's a very polarizing time. In any tech shift, I have not seen this level of dispersion of beliefs about what is happening. people closest to the change disagree on what the change even is. There's every week it's like, oh, we're cooked, or we are cooking. It's kind of the pendulum of the sentiment is swinging. And I think scientists equally also disagree with when AGI will be achieved, what it means for it to be achieved. So we're all kind of shooting in the dark. But I do think underneath all of that, there's a very obvious recognition of how consequential the shift is, which I think is causing, the prices to be inflated, because there's this sense of generational FOMO. Like, you can't afford to sit this one out, whether you're an enterprise adopting AI or you're an investor investing behind the trend. So cluelessness and FOMO, I think.
Exciting
Yeah,
time.
I would say sometimes it feels like fast fashion, right? It's like something's like super hot, and then 6 months later,
So passé.
yeah, people move on. Well, that it's nice that OpenAI and Anthropic now do that. That space is over.
Yeah.
And that wasn't true even in the cloud era. Like when maybe a long time ago Microsoft would release something, you had some time to still win on the desktop. In cloud, when AWS released something, you still had time to execute in infra. It does not seem like the cycle times are very long in the land of AI. Like, it's fast fashion.
Yeah. So I heard you all say a few common themes came up: speed, the velocity of change, the prices, the sheer magnitude of the deals that we are seeing. And we've all seen the pictures, right? Like, we've seen the picture with the investment dollars flowing from NVIDIA to this whole ecosystem of other startup companies that are out there, which then turn around and invest back in NVIDIA chips and so on. So I'm going to ask the hard question: are we in a bubble? Or is it? Let's hear it.
Who gets to go first?
Yeah, who gets to?
I asked Jocelyn earlier, and she said no.
That's not true. You asked me if it was overhyped, and it is not. I think AI is not overhyped, and we are in a bubble.
I agree with her. I think there are pockets of froth. It is undeniable. You sometimes look at deals and you do struggle to reconcile the price that was paid, the market it's in, and the numbers today. But I think the enormity of the change we're in is very real. The reason I don't think it's a bubble is look at our own lives. Like, my life kind of runs on AI from personal to professional, and I think that change is rippling across the whole ecosystem. So in terms of usage, it's not made up. People are adopting it. It will drive change. But yeah, some things will survive and others won't. I think, Jocelyn, you had an excellent framing when we were talking. You just have to pick the Amazon of this generation, and a lot of other companies will die.
Yeah. Tim, any thoughts?
I don't think we are. I mean, I look at one metric, I look at ARR on the companies, and I look at one of our companies is Anthropic, and I look at that and I go, okay, that looks pretty good. And then I look at the application layer companies that sit on top of OpenAI and Anthropic, and it feels like some of them are just like printing cash in a basement. So like, it doesn't feel like it is because there's real revenue attribution. There was an interesting report that came out from Coatue this morning. I don't know if anybody saw it, but the PE ratios of today versus, say, the .com, the like 99, is not anywhere close to what it was in 99. So we're not quite there from a metric standpoint. But again, I go back to the ARR of the companies, and that's what I appreciate.
What about the other part of what I said, which is the fact that so much of the valuations and so much of the whole ecosystem seems to be predicated on hardware scarcity? What would you say to that? Is that truly, are we seeing true business value getting unlocked, or is it still very much a hardware scarcity play where a lot of the valuation is driven by GPU inventory and so on? Or is that a bad question?
Well, I mean, I think, I do believe that token prices are going to go down over time. So I'm like less concerned about that. I do think that we'll move away from a world of auto-regressive models over time over to something like a diffusion model, for example. So you'll have less inference time and less reliance on GPUs necessarily. But I don't know. It's not something that's like top of mind for me right now when it comes to investing.
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, so there are two bubbles to talk about, right? Like, there's like, hey, VCs are paying crazy prices for startups that don't have much traction yet, but which is, what VCs think of when we're sitting on a panel. But there's definitely like, hey, is there like a bubble going on in public market prices where NVIDIA is buying from Oracle, who's buying from OpenAI, who's buying from, right? Is this like, round tripping? And there's no question that like this insane infrastructure build out is going on right now. And there is hardware scarcity driving high prices for hardware, but the prices that are being paid for hardware have ROI attached to them. There is we can feel assured that Anthropic and OpenAI are monetizing the hardware they're buying and building, and that all the cloud providers are doing the same. And this build out may seem frantic and aggressive and way ahead of need today, but even though I agree with you that we're probably moving to more diffusion models, that we're probably moving to more efficiency, that we're probably moving towards like being able to do inference at way lower cost, I still don't think that we're building infrastructure we won't need. Like never in the history of technology, which maybe is only a few decades, but like the demand for compute has only accelerated. And the cheaper we make compute, like this is the lesson of the cloud era, the cheaper you make compute, the more people will come up with ways to exploit it and derive value from it. So I don't think the infrastructure build out is gonna be wasted. We're not gonna have data centers gathering dust. I think weird kind of externalities are happening. I think like hiring is absurdly slow. Like this is in 30 years in the tech industry, this is the slowest I've ever seen the job market for, especially for junior software engineers, and it's being blamed on AI. It is not AI. It is the impact of CapEx depreciation, like competing with payroll, like on public company stock prices and margin pressure. So like there's weird stuff happening that people don't fully understand, but is it a bubble? No, not in that sense.
I think that's a really astute point. There's like a whole different world, which is like the Mag 5, spending money to build GPU infrastructure and in effect using their balance sheets to pay for it all. In some, it's like some form of like
the competition.
Yeah,
let's be clear.
and I think in some ways it's like quantitative easing. Like they have the capacity to put the capex down instead of doing share buybacks. They can depreciate it on a schedule which we might say is long, but they have the luxury of deciding that for themselves. And then we're all the beneficiaries of it. I mean, I feel like we all get AI for a much lower cost, and we don't have to pay for the real cost. So I think startups, tech companies, users, like, go home and just hug your AI. Like it's paid for by the most profitable companies in the world, and if they're overspending, it's their money. I mean, they have more money than they know what to do with, and Jocelyn's raising a great point, which
It might be public market investor money.
that
might come back to
possibly they could be investing in people instead of machines. So that's a different point, which I think is a very important point that she's raising, which is like part of the reason why they can pay for it is because they can substitute capital for labor, and their earnings growth will allow them to pay for the GPU infrastructure that we all get to use. So I think when there is maybe a substitution of labor, but as consumers, you get AI for a much lower cost than you would have otherwise.
They're not being irrational. They're extrapolating demand curves, and the thing is that it's anybody's guess how the demand curves play out, but it seems like it's headed in one very great direction. The other thing is, if you look at the earnings calls of the hyperscalers, they're all running into supply constraints right now, so they're just responding to that. And there's such a sense of urgency to bet the farm because it's game theory. If they don't do it and their competitor does, and we are supply constrained, that they're going to lose the market. So it's a little bit of they cannot afford not to do it this way, and then they'll take the write-off later if they have to. But I think the fact that there's so much market appetite for this kind of spend right now gives them the legitimacy to go and make these investments. So they're capitalizing on that.
So folks, you all heard it. Go home and hug your AI. If nothing else, when the overlords take over, you will be in their good books. So, but seriously, I think John makes a really good point. I think we are all getting a ton of value for really pennies on the dollar. Somebody else is paying the bill, so make use of it. So. Point taken, John. I'm going to go home and hug my AI tonight. So I think you brought up a good point, pricing. I'm sure as VCs, as investors, you all are very keenly focused on how this whole monetization game works. And that's being completely disrupted with these AI native products. So how do you think about pricing for the investments you make? How do you encourage your, the startups you back to think about pricing? Maybe I'll start back with you, Tim.
Yeah, I mean, it's not too different really from my past life. I was at Splunk, and we thought about things in terms of credits and usage-based pricing. Like a lot of companies are moving in that direction still. I think the big trick is still how do you abstract away the idea of tokens. That's really where the money is at. And so I see a lot of people really going towards third-party services like Metronome or Orb, and sort of just gravitating towards having that as the place that you send your metrics and you do your billing. I wouldn't say that I've seen succinct innovation in pricing quite yet. I think people are still trying to figure out how to reconcile that with tokens.
I too would much rather talk about how startups price their products than how VCs price equity, so I'm going to lean into that, even though I know you were asking the other one. But I do think actually there's a really fascinating topic of discussion here, which is SaaS changed pricing, it changed the business model of software companies. We used to charge software and then for a license fee, and then you owned the software and we had the money and that was that, and we had to go find more money to make revenue the next year. Maybe we could sell, upgrades. And the change in technology stack to SaaS also enabled a change in business models to subscriptions. It's not as obvious yet that AI as a paradigm shift in the tech stack is intrinsically a change in the business model of tech companies, but I think it opens up a lot of new business models. So we have plenty of AI application companies who are doing the traditional SaaS thing of either ARR, by the seat, you get your AI companion for $20 a month, is how we're paying for copilots and G Suite, whatever Google's calling it. And you have your consumption-based billing, so instead of, buying, cloud CPU minutes, we're buying tokens per second. So those are traditional pricing models that startups can employ. But we're starting to see startups who are charging as a share of labor that they're saving. So you are hiring your AI employee for a fee per year, and you get this many employees. You charge by the agent, or we're starting to be able to see outcome-based pricing. So we're gonna, your call center is gonna have these efficiencies or this increased NPS, and based on those metrics, you'll pay the startup. Or it's starting to look more like a BPO or an SI, like a services business where you pay for the service, you're paying for the outcome. And this starts to put startups in a place where we can do value-based pricing. And that stuff is all really interesting, but it's not super codified. And I think it's way more complex and interesting in media subject, whereas, how are startups pricing? It's like they can price what the market will bear. And right now, VCs have consensus that the internet is the next big thing. And when VCs have consensus on something, and when VC is well capitalized as it is right now, prices are high.
Yeah, I think to the point of the prices people are paying, the one point that stands out to me is a little bit of, it is kind of the promise of AI that the barriers to creation will go to zero. And in that world, what matters is the creator. So the nutty prices are really for the teams that people think can adapt infinitely to a changing ecosystem. So that's why the prices don't really line up with revenue, because revenue ramps are great, but they can equally fall off a cliff the next day if Anthropic or OpenAI launch a direct competitor. And we've seen it with the coding startups too. The initial cohort of users that adopt are very open to experimentation, very open to switching, so they move en masse when feature changes happen. So there isn't a degree of loyalty in the market yet. So revenue ramps are fickle, and the whole landscape is shifting every day. So what VCs end up paying for is teams, which is why it is not reflected in the numbers yet, and which is why the multiples make zero sense. It's a little bit like, that Silicon Valley episode where they're like, why did you get revenue? Now we have to put a multiple on it, and that limits your valuation. It's a little bit of what's happening. People are paying up for teams, and prices don't make sense as a result.
I think also this analogy I use is it's like alchemy. There's a lot of big companies that have a lot at stake, and there's these black boxes of AI, and no one really knows how they work, except for a small number of people who have enough field time to be able to tell you, no, don't do reinforcement learning here. That's not going to work. Or if you do reinforcement learning, this is how you get the data. No, don't get synthetic data. That's not going to. So there's all these nooks and crannies of information, which again is more like how you think about chemistry. And like, why is it so hard to like make a semiconductor? It's because like there's like so much field time required to successfully make a semiconductor, because like every process step is so important. I do think like the field of AI is evolving that way, where it looks easy from afar, but then those like last mile problems of like, did you really do context engineering? Or when you ask the agent to use tools, were they general purpose tools or were they specialized tools? And which of these were actually delegated out by a super agent versus which of these are like smaller agents that are fine-tuned? These are not, there's like, you can go to 1,000 conferences on these topics, but unless you've done the equivalent of driving thousands and thousands and thousands of miles on that use case, your wonderful agent may not do what the next guy's agent is doing. And so if you have a company that has a couple $100 billion market cap that is trying to navigate these nooks and crannies, they will pay a lot of money for the small number of alchemists that can fix their black box, because so much is at stake, right? Their business is at stake. And I think that's why people are paying for these teams, is because, use Meta as an example. I mean, they have so much at stake, being first, second, third, or fourth in this race, and they're going to pay everything they can to be first.
That's great. I think you took my question, which was, I had asked the question in a more narrow sense of how do you evaluate how companies monetize their offerings, but you took it in two directions, both that and how you look at the companies and their pricing. So that's wonderful.
And the pricing for labor. You got 3 answers for the price of
Yeah,
labor.
I know. There's 3 for 1. I love it. Another question that's definitely near and dear to our hearts at Outshift is this whole debate around open models versus closed models, open source versus closed source, which has been playing out in various forms for the last several decades, and now is coming up to the fore again with generative AI and the models. What's your take on that? What's your thought on the pros, cons? How do you see that playing out? Saanya, maybe I'll start with you.
Okay. I don't think anyone's going to standardize on one thing. I think we're going to see, a diversified architecture. Maybe the highest value queries that you absolutely need to get right get routed to the closed source proprietary model that gives you bang for buck but is expensive, and then everything else, like the 80%, gets routed to open source that optimizes for cost. I think we're going to see everyone using large models, small models, open source. Like right now, everything's new, so people just are keeping up with the pace of change and maybe have a primary model relationship. But even when it comes to closed source, enterprises I talk to are using both OpenAI and Anthropic. Maybe teams internally have different contracts and one use case runs on one versus the other. So I think we're going to see a proliferation of architectures. People will design it in the way that suits them, and both will coexist.
John?
I think we're asking that question at a really interesting time, because I think for the first time in a long time, people are now coming forward and saying that they're using like distilled versions of Kimi and Quen, and that's not the same. It doesn't have like the same maybe like negative association that maybe DeepSeek had when DeepSeek came out. So I think everyone would love for there to be like an acceptable flavor of open source. Like I think people were rooting for Llama. I think Llama's rooting for Llama. It's the kind of thing everyone roots for. And at the same time, it's an expensive game. And so, it's kind of hard to see people staying ahead wholly on open. So I guess I agree with Sanya's point, which is like a lot of people will view their engineering advantage as being able to pull together best of breed, but I don't see any one, party running away with it. And for a while, I think no one was using open source because it was falling behind.
Yeah, I think in the last even 6 weeks, the open weight models have come a really long way to closing the gap, and so like Llama 4 was just a bust, and I'm rooting for Meta. I mean, look, it is fabulous for the startup ecosystem that this, and for every downstream, consumer of AI, like on the Hug Your AI theme, like Like, it is fabulous. That is so competitive, and it looks so lucrative that deep-pocketed entities, whether that is Meta or whether that is the massive asset allocators that are pouring cash into OpenAI and Anthropic to keep developing these models. Like, it is so good for the ecosystem, for the advance of technology, for the free stuff rolling downhill to everybody else trying to build, that there is so much competition and so much perceived value that we have not one or two or three, but like 10 excellent models. And that there is no real lock-in today, unlike even cloud, where frankly, like, maybe compute is a commodity, but cloud is an incredibly lucrative business. I think that will be the case for these foundation models as well. They will be commodity. They will also be incredibly lucrative because they will find ways to add value or to be best of breed for certain types of queries. I think, there might have been 2-3 years ago, you might have had a VC panel where people would sort of disagree over whether there's going to be, one winner of the foundation model space. I think today you're just going to have the consensus on this panel that it will look oligopolistic. There's going to be choice. And in fact, that it will be what Saanya said, that like it's not like you're picking a foundation model. It's like at the individual query in a point of time level is when you're picking which model to use. So everybody's going to use all the models. I think that's just fantastic for innovation. We all get a lot, like we all get to start building a lot higher. But for the types of products where you need access to the weights, where like certain types of innovation you really only can build on top of open weight, and a startup cannot build without access to the weights of the model, it is so good that the open weight models are near parity or close behind the proprietary models, especially, I think, maybe not on the most frontier, but all the frontier work is happening on reasoning and thinking. It's happening on like the long time queries. The queries, the low latency queries where you're asking and answering right away, open weight is as good as proprietary, which would not have been true like 6 months ago, even maybe 3 months ago. So the fact that the open weight models are near parity is so good for startups. Like the quality of products we're gonna get, the quality of competition we're gonna get with startups able to compete with the model owners is good. It's a win.
I think at least when it comes to text-to-text models, I do one thing when I meet companies is I kind of like disarticulate their architectures a bit to try to understand how they're built, because that's my only trick. And I primarily see OpenAI and Anthropic, to be honest. Then that's in the text-to-text case. Unless you have some kind of like post-training requirement, that's all I really see, to be honest. Now, if you're talking about text-to-image or text-to-video or something like that, then certainly you could see all the open weight models being used on companies like Base 10 and things like that. You'll see them there, and they're being used by companies. So I think it depends more on your use case.
Got it. I'm gonna ask one final general question, and then I'll get into like specifics for each of you. So this one is probably very interesting to the audience. Personally, on a personal level, as a productivity boosting tool, how do you use AI in your day-to-day? And I'm gonna put John, I'm gonna put you on the spot first.
For our firm, we have a lot of what I would call like information research. So it's basically like what would be the things that we would go search on ourselves, and in some ways like can AI distill down and synthesize what we might find interesting so that we can cover and read more effectively. And then on a personal side, I find it to be like an amazing way to teach my children. So like they have a question about the world. I only have like partial recollection of the way the world worked, something in history or something in religion. And so it helps me to become more familiar with the knowledge that is on the internet, and then helps me to distill it down for them at different ages. So I think it's one of the killer apps for me is like teaching children knowledge.
That's so great. I was just looking up on ChatGPT, how do you derive the volume of a cone from first principles, the other day, because I'd completely forgotten, so it was great. Jocelyn.
So if you think about the core workflow of a VC, a huge part of it is navigating my social graph, whether that is to source and find introductions to entrepreneurs, or whether that is to connect a startup in my portfolio with an enterprise buyer, and so to be able to do that more efficiently, to not be sitting there thinking like, okay, how many directors of IT at banks do I know, and like which ones might have the problem that this startup has? So being able to connect those dots more efficiently is like pretty secret sauce turbo fuel for what I do. And then, more prosaically, like if you think about where I'm spending my minutes in the day, it's mostly in my inbox and my calendar. And so to be able to summarize what's come in, but to be able to more rapidly respond to what's going out, that stuff has gotten crazy good really recently. Like I was kind of, for a long time, I was like, why aren't I getting more help with this? And it's getting materially pretty helpful.
Saanya.
One for me personally, it's completely replaced Google. Like it was Diwali this week and I was looking up the puja to do on ChatGPT. So personally, every use case is now on ChatGPT. But I think it's very good for personal learning to get very quickly up to speed on different things. The thing it's let me do is when I'm in meetings now, I can be a lot more present because note-taking is completely, taken over. So things like that where it speeds up efficiency. With ChatGPT particularly, there's an element of now, very recently, you can do scheduling. And when VO 3.1 was launching, there were like rumors about it for 2 days that, oh, it's coming, and I really wanted to know when it's out. So I'd schedule like a scan every hour, and it would report to me on like, oh, it hasn't launched yet, it still hasn't launched, and then ChatGPT broke the news to me immediately when it was launched. So I love the fact that they're now layering in, tasks and reminders, and I think over the next year, it's going to become a lot more interactive instead of just querying. So that'll be exciting.
Claude Code. I live in that thing. I mean, that's all I do when I'm not in Zooms or in board meetings. I'm basically coding, and Claude Code has completely changed. I mean, I'm an engineer masquerading as a VC, so like it's just completely changed how I write code. It's like a complete 180. Like I actually kind of miss real coding because like 95% of my code is written by Claude. Yeah.
Wow.
You don't get to be in flow anymore.
Yeah, you don't. You know that feeling when you're coding and like you can just sort of feel like you're in this groove. Like that's just gone. Like I'm just talking to a terminal.
How many of you have agents running for you?
I mean,
Autonomous agents.
I don't know that like news summarization is like a quote unquote personalized agent, but I think like the task of like doing autonomous research is something that we have.
I've created little chatbots, on ChatGPT, the GPT store, that are specifically catered to a task, but they haven't gotten agentic yet. It's still you give it context, and it is very good for that, but I'm hoping it gets agentic soon.
Got it. So the autonomy piece of it is still a bit of a challenge. Got it.
I feel like there's still a lot of last mile stuff. Like everybody's calling their AI features agents, but like there's a lot of agentic stuff missing. Like, why do I still have to do my own expenses? Why is an agent not doing my expenses yet? Like, that's pretty lame. We're in the year of our Lord 2025, and like Expensify and Concur have not kicked. And I'm not saying I would back a startup to do that because you're just working in their roadmap. They're going to ship it, and it'll happen. But like, why haven't they shipped it yet?
Got it. So, Jocelyn, you've been at the front seat of of several previous transformations in the industry, right? From virtualization, cloud, and all of that. And now you're focusing on this whole AI native space. What does that mean to you, a company being AI native? What's the characteristic that makes them AI native? What sets them apart?
I think actually my greatest front row seat claim to fame is that I was a summer intern at Netscape in 1995. For those of you who've never heard of Netscape, surely you've heard of the browser moment. Netscape was the browser in question. So what it means to be AI native, I think so many people right now, it's easier to talk about what it's not, which is the sort of just add AI. Like I've got a piece of software, or I'm a startup and I'm sprinkling AI on my pitch deck, or I've got, there's some existing product category like CRM, and I'm going to do the AI CRM. Like that to me is AI functionality. And I think in truth, the incumbents are the ones best positioned to do that. It should be Expensify who adds AI to doing your expenses. We don't need somebody net new in the world to do that. I think to me, AI native, like right now, I've got just add AI in my inbox. I'm using Gmail, and AI is summarizing emails for me, and it's helping draft replies. But what would be an AI native workflow? If you reinvented communication knowing you had the power of AI, what would it even look like? And so I think to me, AI native is It's not just AI speeding up or short-circuiting, fitting into existing workflow. It's workflow reimagined starting from the AI capabilities. Or it's AI native infrastructure would be infrastructure that is only needed because it uniquely solves a problem of a training or an inference workload. So yeah, it's not just sort of incremental to the status quo. It's sort of like it's starting over.
Yeah. In a sense, it's starting in the world in which, it didn't know the world before generative AI, in other words. Yeah. Starting with that as the base assumption. Okay, anyone else have thoughts on that?
I think Jocelyn kind of nailed it. I would say also on the back end, you're probably seeing a movement away from very RESTful web services into something more agentic looking. And what I mean by that is, LLMs in a while loop effectively with a bunch of LangGraph or something sprinkled in, but that's where basically everyone's moving their back-end architectures as far as I can tell.
I would just add two things. One is I think the user experience is different. So to the extent it looks like a SaaS product with a copilot, it's probably not AI native. To the extent that the user experience has been dramatically reimagined. And I think a lot of people are struggling with that. That is a sign of an AI native startup. And the second one is I sometimes use like the Google DeepMind AlphaGo moment as like a reminder to everyone that like maybe the whole point is that if you have an AI native product, it can do the job better than a human can, and it will do it in a way that is AI native, which may not be explainable to humans, or it may only be explainable to humans after the fact. And so I think deep down inside, that's really what a lot of companies should be trying to do, is like get the AI to solve the problem using a deep learning or unsupervised learning kind of technique, as opposed to anthropomorphizing software with AI.
Yeah, there was that very interesting moment in the AlphaGo movie, I think you're referring to, where the AI discovered a new way to beat that very simple game by burrowing tunnels into it. If you haven't seen the movie, check it out. It's really worth
I
watching.
think it's Move 38, is that right? Move 38?
Yeah, something like that. Very, very interesting, very profound, really. So I'm gonna, bolt on to that question. So John, from your perspective, right, like we've seen, so we talked about agents and the fact that, there is a proliferation of agents, but at the same time, it also seems like agents are not quite there in some ways, multi-agentic systems are not quite there. What do you think the market is getting right about agents, and conversely, what are they not getting? What are they getting wrong about it, about the promise of agents?
I think Jocelyn referred to this as the last mile problem. I think it's a really good simplification of like if you're not doing the job completely, then the human is there in some form, right? And I would say like an oversimplification of maybe how I feel about agentic AI is like in some ways like we're underestimating the capabilities of what the AI can do, and we're overestimating the role of the human. We're asking the human to do quite a bit when we're earning their trust or explaining to them this is how we're doing things, or we're sort of again trying to like anthropomorphize the process. And AI, to be perfectly honest, is like better off just being AI. And I think that's where like we're trying to like constrain and contain these animals to say, hey, wouldn't it be great if like along the way you explained to me what you were doing, and then you allowed me to have a say in it all, and like here's a bunch of guardrails, and like let's like circulate a specification so that we have like a system prompt that we all agree on. So there's just a lot that we're doing to contain an AI agent, because I don't think we quite fully understand and trust what it will do. But I think we need to put it in environments where it will be its best self, and in some ways like go and answer questions to problems and do work in a more unconstrained way. But either because we don't trust it or because it's too expensive, the frontier is not of AI agent startups is not necessarily moving in that direction.
Yeah, I think the one thing is agent is a very abused term and used very widely for a category of things that it shouldn't apply to. Secondly, I think the potential of the tech is there, but we have to do a lot of systems engineering work over the next few years to actually bring it into the enterprise. Because right now we don't have the proper, scaffolding needed for memory, for context. Most of the enterprises don't have a way to actually make their data actionable and useful. When we talk to companies that are on the frontier of this technology, it's a very different conversation. And then you go and talk to enterprises trying to adopt this technology, and all of their data is unstructured, fragmented. They don't actually have a way to make it actionable. So I think there is a very divorced reality between the tech where it is today and how prepared enterprises are to adopt it, which is why you end up getting these headlines of like 95% of pilots don't have any ROI. It's not because the tech is overhyped, it's because we're not prepared to adopt it. So a lot of the stuff that has been, shoved to the sidelines, like investing in data hygiene, investing in governance policies, because it didn't have an immediate ROI, has now gone from being a vitamin to a painkiller. You literally needed to debottleneck AI adoption. And I think that's where agents kind of get constrained today, because our reality is very different from our fantasy. And I think a lot of value will be created over the next few years in just getting people to be of this century first, and then we adopt AI. Like, there are companies that haven't migrated to the cloud. So obviously the AI adoption cycle, the agentic adoption cycle is going to take a while to play out. And there is a lot of risk inputting non-deterministic systems into an enterprise where the stakes are so high. So we will need to build a scaffolding to bring a degree of supervision and control when you bring them into the enterprise. And I think tremendous opportunity to invest behind enablers and debottleneckers of AI and agents in the next few years.
So this is super interesting. I think both of you alluded to, I'm going to build on the metaphor that you used, which I think is very powerful. You said these AI agents are like big, powerful animals, and we need to just let them run free, right? But we are constraining them in some way, anthropomorphizing them. I wonder if part of it is because we just don't have, again, and Saanya, you mentioned it's because the enterprises don't have the data hygiene to be able to use them in the way that they should, et cetera, right? So is it the case that, again, coming back to the previous question, Jocelyn, for the AI native companies that are coming up that have not seen a world before, would they build their constructs and their businesses in a way that can let these animals run free?
Man, I have only the most boring answer to that question, which is it depends. This is so dependent on use case. Is this for insurance underwriting? Is this for email productivity? I can't imagine one answer to that question. I'm sorry. My feeling.
That's okay. Tim?
I mean, I think the biggest hurdle in that regard is really, I find that companies don't want to write the proper evals to basically support the agents. That's really the limiting factor. I hear it coming up time and time again in my own portfolio companies, where people just want to get to production as soon as they can because there's just like this gold rush in front of you, right? But the way that you sort of put these things into productions is you put guardrails and evals in front of them. So, until that happens, I think you're going to continue to have this problem.
All right, I think we have 1 minute left, so I'm going to ask quick round from everyone. What excites you the most about the coming decade? Tim?
I mean, obviously it's AI, but I guess very short-sightedly, I'm excited about the future where agents execute. I think that there's going to be this sort of brand new cloud substrate that basically services agents and basically supports them in the way that AWS did for the cloud. I think you're going to have something sort of pop up that's very similar for agentic execution. So that's probably where I spend most of my time right now, is sort of hunting down those types of companies.
I mean, this is kind of like parochial and specific to my own interests and passions, but spent my whole career as a software engineer and a leader of software engineers, and now an investor behind software engineers, people building products with software. And I think that I already told you I was an intern at Netscape in 95. So like in 30 years, we've gone, like the software development cycle has, transformed, object-oriented became the vogue. We went from C to Python. We went from, native to cloud. We went to, agile. Like all those things felt transformative at the time, and they're dust. They are they're nothing compared to what's coming in the next 10 years. This is not the journey from C to Python. This is the journey from punch cards to C, what it's going to look like. I really think we're at the end of history and the start of a new history on the, I can't even call it software engineering because I think that that job title is going to be as passé as punch card operator. But I don't think that the job function of creating products out of technology, that job is not going away. I think there will still be a role for humans to do that. It will look so wildly different in 10 or 20 years than it did for the whole, 30 years I've been paying attention. And so I'm just like, I'm pretty geeked out for that.
I'm probably most excited about what people call like multimodal AI. I mean, in some ways, I think like language is a great way to transmit information, and it is like hyper compressed, and we now taught computers to read and write. But seeing is like a whole nother thing. I mean, if we can somehow teach computers to see and perceive things in the world, and I think we're slowly but surely going to be able to do that, then I think there's a whole bunch of things that like we don't wholly understand that maybe they do. So I'm excited to see what that looks like. And we are definitely teaching computers how to see and perceive. So I guess we'll learn more from them soon enough.
I'm excited for the barriers to creation to continue disappearing and the distance between idea and execution to fully close. I think the world's going to get very, very interesting when everybody has the ability to scale things just from idea. So it'll be cool.
That is awesome. And on that wonderful note, I just heard yesterday at the TEDAI conference, somebody said, cloud gave everyone worldwide access, and AI is going to give everyone a world-class staff. I thought that was a wonderful way to put it, and I think that ties into what you're saying. I think that gap from imagination to creation is going to get narrowed and maybe completely disappear at some point. So on that note, thank you again, everyone. This has been wonderful.